So, to continue on, we're just talking about solutions to learned helplessness. You would think that Martin Seligman, yeah, what his whole career would be shaped around this learned helplessness, but he's seen it and he's like, how can I actually help people? I'm going to study the opposite side of the coin here. And he coined a term called learned optimism.
Love it.
The theory hinges on individuals having a optimistic mindset and those with a pessimistic mindset. And the optimists were the people that were the most resistant to helplessness. The optimists were compared to pessimists in three categories. So there is permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. The first one, permanence, is optimistic people believe that bad events are temporary, but positive events are permanent. The second one, pervasiveness. Optimistic individuals compartmentalize helplessness and allow good events to influence other parts of their life. I kind of talked about that a little more. Is the helplessness goes everywhere. The third one, personalization. Optimists blame negative events on outside causes and internalize positive events. So there's actually, it's not exactly this, but there's a thing called actor-observer bias.
Okay. What is it?
Well, fancy ask. A person blames negative experiences on external influence, but for others, it's due to internal influence. Example is 2 employees had to fly in somewhere for a conference. The person that thinks that them being tired and not doing good is due to the jet lag from the flight, and then they look at the other person not doing bad. It's like, oh, they're incompetent, they're lazy, kind of thing. For most of this episode now, we're going to talk about how we can become an optimist.
All right.
And go away from our pessimistic attitudes. But you kind of mentioned too having a support group. And I think that was the first thing that came to my mind is, although, like you said, they still feel like they were the ones in the support group, maybe it might be helpful to have like an accountability partner that reminds them of what they want to do, but more so who they are as a person. They're like, it's kind of like their cheerleader squad.
Yeah, that was something that was brought up in the focus groups, is wanting to have that support community, but not necessarily with the people that are actually close in your life. So kind of an online community. Some of them wanted there to be like just an online forum where people could talk with others. Some suggested like a dating app for people who want to quit smoking, but like not actually a dating app, but just like an application that people could go on who want to connect with other people who are trying to quit smoking, that like from all around the world, that they could just like send positive messages back and forth with, or, you know, talk about the challenges they've been going through, but it's not someone directly in their life, because a lot of people find it really challenging, you know, this idea of learned helplessness. You know, they have this sense of helplessness in themselves and lack confidence, which can make them feel embarrassed in front of their peers. Like they don't want to keep unsuccessfully attempting to quit in front of these people who are close to them. So sometimes a lot of people make quit attempts in secret. And so this would be a way for them to get support outside of their normal social circles.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if it would be like stigmatized. Yes. Because there's like this just on the side of being like strong and capable of doing things, right? and they kind of stigmatize themselves. Well, not you don't you know what I mean? Is that
No.
they think that they're weak in their social circles, and whether the other people believe it or not, that's a belief they hold.
Yeah. I think it does go both ways a lot of the time there. I think you're right that they, at times, maybe they're creating, they're emphasizing the stigma on themselves from their own social circles. But, I think it definitely does exist that if you've known someone and they've told you a million times they're going to quit and they never do, I think it's easy for people to start writing that off and being like, oh yeah, you're going to quit. Sure.
When you hear that too, and you're like, well, I'm just going to stop. Again, I'm going to stop trying, or I'm going to stop expressing how I feel. That's why when I was thinking about this, it would be nice to do that accountability buddy, that they could remind you of times or ask you, make you think of times that you overcame other hardships. Because the second point, their pervasiveness, is that optimistic individuals compartmentalize helplessness and allow positive events to go into other parts of their life. So that would be one way to like kind of change your whole mindset on it all. And I don't know if there's actually any research on this, but I would say it is really important to have that like accountability like frequently right off the bat when you first try, compared to like further down the road. Because that when you go through the withdrawals and stuff, like the thought that can come through your mind is that it's never ending, and that like the effects are permanent kind of thing, right? So if you have someone there to remind you when the withdrawals are the strongest, that you're thinking logically kind of thing. I don't know.
Sure.
Seligman did they used a college class, university class, and they taught freshmen optimism, and they found that they were less likely to be depressed and have anxiety disorders.
Yeah, for sure. I think whether it's a course or whether it's just something that, within support groups that already exist, maybe needs to be integrated more, better online videos about it. There should be, there's so many websites that have a lot of resources available to people who are on their quitting journeys. And so maybe there needs to just be more resources available to them on there. Try to change that narrative.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, and that is probably the point I was trying to make before about focusing on them and not the actual habit.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? For just so many things, if you have bad habits that you don't like and you want to stop them, sometimes the easiest way to do that is just to work on building yourself up in other areas.
Get some confidence, allow it to pour into other areas of your life.
Exactly.
Maybe that's why you should tackle smaller goals before the big ones.
Just make your big goals into a bunch of small goals. They're attainable.
Yep. That doesn't seem like it's all crumbling in one thing. It's only a tiny goal that crumbles.
Exactly.
So he did make a note in his book that if you want to appear sympathetic to the troubles others are having, you don't want to be super optimistic right off the bat. You want to do it once they have confidence and they understand that you're empathetic towards them. It's ineffective until you get to that point, he says. So.
Well, I think I completely agree with that. And the focus groups that I was a part of for work, we were using the focus groups to inform the development of a campaign by the Canadian Cancer Society that was to support people on their quitting journeys. And they actually really adopted, kind of just what he said there. They really adopted that, or attempted to adopt it in the messaging on the campaign, by, constantly referring to quit attempts, the quit journey, and really making it seem like you don't have to quit right now. Like in the campaign, it's not like this is your one chance. Like you quit now. Like do it. It was just like, how can we help you make a quit attempt?
Right.
Not how can we help you completely quit forever, but how can we support you to make an attempt to quit?
Right. Seligman provided some answers to changing pessimism to optimism, and he borrowed Albert Ellis's model of ABCs, which you have adversity, beliefs, and consequences. So, for example, you have adversity. You're trying to quit smoking. Then you have a belief about that. A pessimist would say, I can never do this. It's too hard. I am weak. I can't do this. An optimist would say, I can do this. It'll be hard, but I have the support of my friends. So then it goes on to the third, the consequence of that belief. Pessimist, you give up and you don't quit smoking. The optimist would be, you continue to try quit smoking, or you are successful in quitting. The whole idea of this ABC model is that in order to change the consequence, you have to change that belief. And changing the beliefs makes it easy to see how the outlook can change in the rest of your life too. So what he says to do is keep an ABC diary. Yes.
More diaries.
More diaries. And a lot of this, if you want to change yourself, you got to use some introspection. And I find it really useful is to write stuff down, because just talking about stuff, it's kind of like a fleeting thought and it doesn't stick with you usually. So it does make sense.
I also like to audio record things. I find that really helpful. Sometimes we'll be like laying in bed at nighttime, ready to go to bed, and then I'll have like a odd thought or something. Like with my thesis, I'll be like, oh, I need to remember to do this. So then I'll just like make an audio message on my phone to me. Because it's just easier than I can really ramble out what my thought process is and what, like, at that time, and then go back to it the next day. Because sometimes if you just made like a small note to yourself, it doesn't really help you remember what you were thinking in that moment and where the kind of passion and drive was coming from. So I really like doing audio notes for things.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's I usually write notes, and then if you come back to the note like a month later, you're like, what was I actually thinking here? I'm just going to delete this now.
Yeah.
So using some introspection, once you are aware of your pessimistic belief, there are two ways that you can deal with them. The first, distraction. So you think of something else when you feel the pessimistic thought or understand it's coming along. So they suggest in the book slamming the table and yelling, "Stop!"
That's the distraction?
Yes. Every time you have a bad thought, which a little cuckoo.
Yeah, it's an aggressive distraction. I think there can be way healthier alternatives to distract yourself from negative thoughts than leaning into aggression.
He also said you can write stop on a note and look at the word stop.
Okay, that's less aggressive.
Or like you've heard of the rubber band trick. Slap the rubber
Snapping
band.
it on your wrist.
When you have the thought.
Yeah, I also think that's an unhealthy habit.
Why do you think that one's unhealthy?
I don't know. I just don't think, like, if you're having a negative thought to then inflict a sense of pain on yourself to get rid of a negative thought, like, why would you want to replace something negative with something negative, right?
Right.
That logic just doesn't work for me. What's his other option?
Yeah, I was gonna say on that same note is grab an ice cube and squeeze it, which I think is different. Like we're talking about an irritation, or the ice cube is to like bring you, like ground you in your thoughts, right? So that's the whole point. I agree with you there. The rubber band is a negative thing.
Yeah.
And then they said you're supposed to pair that with shifting your attention elsewhere, and it doesn't need to be what you want to think, but it's literally like, say, I'm like, oh, I can't do this assignment. I would slam the table and I'll stop and then look at the color on my water bottle immediately after. And that's how they said to distract yourself from that thought. And then after the moment, it'll go away.
Can you imagine if every day, as we're having like negative thoughts in our minds with our desks right next to each other, we both just like are slamming our desks and screaming stop all day? Or doing this in public too. Like we're thinking about all of this in the circumstances of being basic, like in the privacy of your own home. Like these aren't very good coping mechanisms if you're somewhere in public too.
Slam the cement. Sidewalk. The other one they said is tell yourself that you'll think of it later. So yeah. I can't write this essay. You know what? I'm gonna think about how bad I am later. And then they said to write it down. And then they kind of loosely said that like when you ruminate on a thought, that's all it is that's like trying to remind you of something. So if you write it down and then tell yourself you're going to think of it later, that'll get rid of the rumination.
Are you actually supposed to intentionally think about it later, or you're just tricking yourself? You're being like writing it down to think about later, but then you throw the note away and you don't think about it later.
I feel like that's what actually happens. But,
yeah.
I guess I forgot to mention you're supposed to tell yourself you'll think of it later, but state the time you're going to think about it.
Oh. This is like, we did that one episode on delayed gratification. This is like delayed negativity or something. I don't know. I don't love it for sure. So I'm not meaning to seem as if I completely don't love where they're trying to go with your theory. I definitely can understand that there are times when you're in a circumstance and you don't have the capacity right then to deal with negative thoughts. And so I do agree that there should be, coping mechanisms to help you potentially deal with them later. I just don't know if I feel like the ones they've shared are perhaps most effective. But again, I've never tried any of them. So maybe someone who's listening has tried some of these methods and could let us know if they've ever had success at, experiencing negative thoughts and then pushing them aside and actually dealing with them later, not just pushing them to the side and bearing them down to build up more.
Yeah. So it's good that you're a skeptic of it, because they even note in their book that it's like there's of the two options, distraction is only temporary and it doesn't do a lot for you.
Yeah. Okay,
it's
good.
just like a quick fix kind of thing. The second one is disputation. So providing an argument to that belief. And the way I look at it is it's similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is you're trying to change the thought, right? And in another way too, it's kind of showing compassion for yourself. The pessimistic thought is usually something about yourself. You internalize some aspect of your character.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I'm guessing where they're going with this is if you're having a negative thought, like if I was, sitting in our office working and for some reason I had a negative thought of like, oh, I think Julian's mad at me right now, then I would just need to confront that negative thought and go like, why would Julian be mad at me right now? Like, what's the possibility, the logic or reasonableness that Julian would be mad right now? If he is mad right now, how can we resolve it or something? Like just having that kind of logical conversation with yourself about the negativity. Is that what they're getting at?
Yeah. And he adds to his ABCs, he adds D and E, which is disputation is D. E is energization, which is basically stating how your thought has changed from a pessimistic to an optimistic belief. So, like you said, you're kind of questioning why I would be mad at you. You would say, I originally thought that Julian was mad at me, but then I looked at it and I don't think he's mad at me because of this. So again, like acknowledging that you had a irrational belief. And then I think it builds upon each time you do this.
I mean, that makes sense.